What would you do if a politician publicly shamed you for the very sacrifice that cost you a part of your body? Imagine the sting of betrayal, the weight of a medal on your chest, and the eyes of a crowd watching as your honor is questioned on a day meant to celebrate it. Meet Eleanor Brooks, a former Army captain and Medal of Honor recipient, stepping back into her hometown of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, after a decade away. 10 years ago, she left to serve in Afghanistan, returning with scars, both visible and invisible, after an IED blast took her left leg and the lives of 3 of her soldiers. Now, as a barista navigating the quaint streets of a town she barely recognizes, she carries the weight of her service in a drawer, the Medal of Honor a silent reminder of a day she'll never forget. Willow Creek has changed. New artisanal shops, eco-friendly markets, and progressive symbols have replaced the American flags of her childhood, a shift that leaves her feeling like a stranger in her own past. At Daily Narrated Stories, we uncover tales of courage and redemption that will leave you inspired. Join us as Eleanor faces a battle she never expected on Memorial Day. Eleanor Brooks traced the raised scars on her left leg, the familiar ritual of adjusting her prosthetic leg grounding her in the dim morning light of her childhood bedroom. The small house in Willow Creek, inherited from her parents, smelled of cedar and nostalgia, a scent that clashed with the memories of desert dust and gunpowder that haunted her dreams. She stood before the mirror, her reflection a testament to a decade of war. Faint lines etched around her emerald eyes, a quiet strength in her posture despite the weight of her past. In the top drawer of her dresser lay the Medal of Honor, its gold surface glinting softly, a symbol of a day in Afghanistan she both cherished and mourned. She wasn't one to wear it casually. It felt too heavy, too sacred, a reminder of the soldiers who didn't make it back. Private Ramirez, whose laughter had filled their outpost with light, Sergeant Carter, who'd shielded a child with his body, and Corporal Nguyen, whose last words had been a whispered prayer for his family. Willow Creek had transformed in her absence. New artisanal bakeries with chalkboard menus, eco-friendly markets, and a younger, more diverse crowd had taken over the sleepy town she'd known, a place where she'd once raced her bike down Elm Street, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a carpenter, dreaming of a world beyond the horizon. Stepping into O'Malley's Market, a family-owned store that had stood for 3 generations, Eleanor felt a wave of relief as a familiar voice rang out like a melody from her childhood. "Captain Brooks, in my shop," called Patrick O'Malley, his weathered face breaking into a grin as he rounded the counter, his arms open wide. "It's been too long, Ellie," she smiled, the warmth of his embrace a tether to the past, a reminder of simpler days when she'd helped stack shelves as a teenager, her laughter echoing through the aisles. "Patrick, you haven't changed a bit," she said, her voice soft but genuine, the scent of fresh bread and pine cleaner grounding her in the moment. "And you're stronger," he replied, his eyes glistening with pride, his hands gripping her shoulders as if to anchor her to the present. "What they told us about Afghanistan, you're a hero." She shifted uncomfortably, deflecting the praise with a practiced ease, the weight of her medal a silent burden in her mind. "I was just doing my job. How's Margaret doing?" As Patrick shared stories of his wife and grandkids, his voice a comforting hum, Eleanor felt the weight of curious stares from other customers. Some looked at her with admiration, their eyes warm with gratitude, others with unease, their gazes lingering on the prosthetic leg peeking out from her jeans, a visible mark of her sacrifice. She'd grown used to it. The whispers, the averted glances, the way some children pointed and then quickly looked away, but it still stung, a quiet reminder of how her service marked her as different in a town that had moved on without her. "I heard you're speaking at the Memorial Day ceremony tomorrow," Patrick said as he rang up her groceries. Apples, a loaf of sourdough, a jar of local honey, his voice warm with encouragement. "The Veterans Committee invited me," Eleanor replied, her fingers tightening around the handle of her canvas bag, the fabric rough against her palm. "I'm a bit nervous, to be honest." Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the anxiety that had kept her awake the night before, the fear of standing before a crowd that might not understand the weight of her words. "You'll do great," he assured her, his hand resting on hers for a moment, a gesture of fatherly support that warmed her heart. "Willow Creek needs to hear stories like yours." As she left the store, Eleanor couldn't shake the doubt that crept into her mind, a shadow that followed her down the street. Patrick's words echoed, but the town she'd returned to felt foreign, its streets lined with new faces and new ideals. The American flags that once fluttered on every porch were now sparse, replaced by rainbow banners and signs advocating for peace and sustainability. She didn't mind the change. She'd fought for the right to choose your own flag, your own cause. But there was a tension in the air, a quiet rift that made her chest tighten with unease, a premonition of the storm to come. As she walked down Elm Street, her boots scuffing against the cracked pavement, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Mayor Daniel Hayes vows to make Willow Creek a sanctuary of peace. The image showed a young mayor, elected 6 months ago, speaking passionately at City Hall, his suit crisp, his expression earnest, a man who seemed to embody the town's new direction. At 35, Daniel Hayes had risen from humble roots, capturing the hearts of Willow Creek's younger voters with his vision of a progressive small town, free from what he called the militarization of civic life. His platform had sparked outrage among veterans, a group that had once been the heart of the town's identity. But the shifting demographics, young families, activists, newcomers seeking a fresh start, had secured his victory, a sign of the changing tides Eleanor now faced. She paused by a new coffee shop, its windows adorned with a mural of doves and olive branches, and stared at the mayor's image, his words echoing in her mind like a distant drumbeat. What did peace mean to a man who'd never seen war, who'd never held a dying soldier in his arms, who'd never made the choice to trade a piece of himself for the safety of others? The question lingered, a quiet challenge that stirred the embers of her resolve. On her way home, Eleanor passed Willow Park, where volunteers were setting up for tomorrow's ceremony. A small stage stood at the park's heart, surrounded by rows of folding chairs, the grass still damp with morning dew, the air crisp with the promise of spring. A middle-aged woman with a megaphone directed the preparations, her voice sharp but warm, a beacon of order in the chaos. "Captain Brooks," the woman called, hurrying over with an outstretched hand, her eyes bright with admiration. "I'm Clara Mitchell from the Veterans Committee. It's an honor to meet you." Eleanor shook her hand, her grip firm but her smile tentative, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "The pleasure's mine," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird, their wings beating against the cage of her ribs. "We're getting everything ready for tomorrow," Clara said, her voice dropping to a whisper, a conspiratorial tone that hinted at trouble. "Despite the challenges, the mayor cut our budget in half this year, says he wants a more inclusive memorial, one that doesn't glorify militarism." Eleanor nodded, her expression neutral, though her stomach churned at the words, a bitter taste rising in her throat. She hadn't come back to Willow Creek to fight political battles, but the mayor's stance gnawed at her, a quiet challenge to the very sacrifice that had cost her so much. Her leg, her comrades, the pieces of her soul she'd left in the desert, scattered like ash on the wind. "Your speech is at 11 a.m., right after the opening," Clara continued, her tone brisk, trying to move past the tension, her hands fidgeting with the clipboard she held. "We're expecting a decent crowd, despite everything." That night, Eleanor sat on the creaking porch of her childhood home, a notebook in her lap, the distant sound of a party cutting through the still air. Laughter, music, voices celebrating a carefree joy that felt a world away from her own thoughts, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of blooming lilacs, their fragrance a bittersweet reminder of the summers she'd spent here as a child, picking flowers with her mother, their laughter a melody now lost to time. How could she put into words what it meant to serve, to lead soldiers into the jaws of danger, knowing some wouldn't return? How could she speak of that day in Afghanistan, when an IED tore through her unit, leaving half of them wounded, herself included, as they shielded a girls' school from insurgents? The memory came unbidden. The crack of the explosion, the searing pain in her leg, the screams of children as she dragged a young girl to safety, her small body trembling in Eleanor's arms, her own blood pooling on the cracked earth, the taste of dust and fear on her tongue, the acrid smell of smoke burning her lungs. She shook her head, trying to focus, but the words wouldn't come. each attempt feeling hollow against the weight of her memories. The faces of her fallen soldiers, Ramirez, Carter, and Gwen, staring back at her from the shadows of her mind, their eyes a silent plea for her to tell their story. Memorial Day dawned with a sky of endless blue, the kind of day that once meant picnics and parades in Willow Creek, a time when the town gathered as one to honor its heroes, their names etched in the collective memory of the community. Eleanor stood before her mirror, her dress uniform laid out on the bed, its deep blue fabric a stark contrast to the faded jeans she'd worn since returning home. She hadn't worn it since the ceremony where she'd received the Medal of Honor, and as she slipped it on, the weight of the fabric felt heavier than she remembered, the insignia glinting like stars against the dark cloth, each one a reminder of the battles she'd fought, the lives she'd saved, and the lives she'd lost. She tied her chestnut hair into a tight bun, her movements precise, a soldier's discipline ingrained in every motion, and hesitated before the medal, its gold surface catching the morning light, a beacon of both pride and pain. Finally, she pinned it to her chest, the weight of it pressing against her heart, a silent tribute to those who hadn't made it back. Ramirez's laughter, Carter's courage, and Gwen's quiet faith, their voices a chorus in her memory. This wasn't about vanity. It was about respect, a promise to honor the fallen with every step she took, a vow she'd made on that blood-soaked day in Afghanistan, a promise she intended to keep. When she arrived at Willow Park, the turnout surprised her. Families with children, their laughter a bright note in the air. Elderly couples holding hands, their faces etched with the wisdom of years. A scattering of young faces, their expressions a mix of curiosity and indifference. Fewer than a decade ago, but still a respectable crowd. Their murmurs a soft hum against the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Clara greeted her, her expression tense, her hands fidgeting with a clipboard, her brow furrowed with worry. "The mayor just arrived and wants to speak before you," she said, her voice edged with frustration, a note of exasperation in her tone. "It wasn't on the program, but it's fine," Eleanor reassured her, her tone calm despite the knot in her stomach, a tightening coil of unease that made her pulse quicken. "It's his town. It's our town," Clara corrected, her eyes flashing with defiance, a spark of resistance that mirrored Eleanor's own, a shared resolve to stand firm in the face of adversity. Eleanor stood by the stage, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, when Mayor Daniel Hayes ascended the steps. At 35, he looked younger than his photos, his tailored suit tie-less, a modern look that screamed approachability, his dark hair neatly styled, his smile polished but cold, a mask that hid the storm beneath. "Good morning, Willow Creek," he called, his voice strong and confident, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd like a wave, commanding attention with an effortless authority. "We're here to remember those who gave their lives for ideals greater than themselves. But we're also here to reflect on peace, on how we can build a future where fewer young people are sent to far-off conflicts." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of agreement and unease, a tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and ominous. "Our town is evolving," he continued, his eyes scanning the audience, his posture commanding, a leader shaping the narrative. "We're building a Willow Creek that values diplomacy over force, dialogue over confrontation, a place where we celebrate heroes of all kinds, teachers, doctors, humanitarian workers, not just those who wielded weapons." Eleanor felt her stomach sink, a cold dread settling in her bones like ice. Not because of the speech itself, there was truth in his words, a vision of peace she couldn't deny, but because of the way he looked directly at her as he spoke, his gaze a silent challenge to her presence, her medal, her very existence as a veteran, a woman who'd given everything for her country. "And now," the mayor said, his tone shifting to a forced warmth, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a performance for the crowd. "We have with us Captain Eleanor Brooks, a daughter of Willow Creek, decorated for her actions in Afghanistan." The applause was polite but muted, a stark contrast to the cheers she'd once imagined upon returning home, a hollow echo of the welcome she'd hoped for, a reminder of the divide that had grown in her absence. As she climbed the stage, her prosthetic legs steady beneath her, the medal a quiet testament to her sacrifice, she passed the mayor, who leaned in with a smile that was more a grimace than a gesture of goodwill. Let's keep this brief and not too militaristic, all right? He whispered, his voice low and cutting. Each word a dagger aimed at her heart, a calculated strike meant to diminish her. There are children present. The words hit her like a slap, her face flushing with a mix of anger and humiliation, her breath catching in her throat as if she'd been struck. 10 years of service, 17 months of rehabilitation, the loss of her leg, all reduced to something potentially traumatic for children, as if her sacrifice were a burden to be hidden, a story to be silenced, a wound too raw for the delicate sensibilities of a crowd that had never known the cost of war. Stepping to the microphone, Eleanor took a deep breath, her hands steady despite the storm raging within her, a tempest of fury and grief that threatened to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Mayor Hayes," she began, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a blade, a beacon of resolve in the darkness. She looked out at the faces before her, her gaze settling on a young girl in the front row, her curious eyes fixed on Eleanor's prosthetic leg, a spark of innocence that grounded her, a reminder of why she'd fought, why she'd bled, why she'd survived. "I didn't come here today to glorify war," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion, each word a testament to the truth she carried, a truth forged in the crucible of conflict. No one who's been there would ever do that. The crowd fell silent, hanging on her words as she spoke of her unit, of the girls' school they protected in Afghanistan. She closed her eyes for a moment, the memory vivid, as if she were back in that dusty village. The crack of gunfire echoing off the mud walls, the screams of children piercing the air, the searing pain as the ID detonated. Her leg torn away as she shielded a young girl, her small body trembling in Eleanor's arms, her own blood pooling on the cracked earth, the taste of dust and fear on her tongue, the acrid smell of smoke burning her lungs, the weight of her soldiers' cries a burden she'd carry forever. "Every soldier under my command risked their life that day," she continued, her voice growing stronger, a fire igniting within her, a blaze of purpose that burned away her doubts. "We were there to ensure those children could grow up and attend school without fear. I lost this leg," she said, gesturing to her prosthesis, the metal glinting in the sunlight like a badge of honor. "But those children didn't lose their future. And if I were asked to do it all again, the answer would be yes, because service isn't about glory or medals. It's about giving of yourself so others can live better." The silence that followed was heavy, a collective breath held, a moment of reverence for the sacrifice she'd laid bare, before applause erupted, growing louder with each passing second, a wave of support that washed over her like a balm, soothing the raw edges of her wounded pride. From the corner of her eye, she saw Mayor Hayes check his watch, his impatience a stark contrast to the crowd's response, his lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure, a man out of step with the moment. As she returned to her seat, Clara squeezed her arm, a silent gesture of gratitude that warmed Eleanor's heart, a small victory in a day that had tested her resolve, a spark of hope in the darkness. The ceremony continued with the reading of the fallen soldiers' names, each one a pang in her chest: Ramirez, Carter, and Gwen, a litany of loss that brought tears to her eyes, a quiet grief that lingered like a shadow. A musical performance followed, a haunting melody that echoed the sorrow and pride she carried, the notes weaving through the air like a thread connecting past and present. As the crowd began to disperse, several people approached her, veterans sharing stories of their own, their voices thick with shared memory, families thanking her for her service, their gratitude a lifeline in a day that had left her raw and exposed. But then she noticed a man filming discreetly, capturing an interaction that would change everything, a shadow of trouble on the horizon, a storm brewing in the distance. Mayor Hayes approached, his smile forced, a mask of civility that barely concealed his disdain, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear, a performance for the crowd that gathered like moths to a flame. An emotional speech, "Captain," he said, his tone dripping with condescension, each word a calculated jab meant to diminish her in the eyes of those watching, though a bit outdated for the values we're trying to promote in Willow Creek. Eleanor turned to face him, her composure a shield against his words, her jaw tight with the effort to remain calm, her heart pounding with a fury she could barely contain. "And what values would those be, Mayor?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel, a challenge in the face of his disdain, a quiet defiance that echoed through the park. "Progress, peace, diplomacy, not the glorification of controversial military interventions," he replied, his words sharp, meant to wound, to strip her sacrifice of its meaning, to reduce her to a relic of a past he sought to erase. The small crowd around them grew, their murmurs a backdrop to the tension, a chorus of unease that mirrored the storm in Eleanor's chest, a rising tide of anger and hurt. "I respect your opinion," Eleanor said, her voice steady, a quiet defiance in her tone that belied the fire within. "But I disagree that honoring sacrifice is the same as glorifying war." The mayor's smile tightened, his eyes flashing with irritation, a crack in his polished facade that revealed the man beneath. "These medals," he said, gesturing to her chest with a dismissive wave, his hand slicing through the air like a blade, "are symbols of a system that sends marginalized young people to their deaths while arms manufacturers profit. That's not what we want to teach our children." A tense silence fell over the group, the air thick with unspoken outrage, the weight of his words a heavy blow to Eleanor's heart, a wound that cut deeper than any blade. Eleanor felt a cold fury building within her, a fire that threatened to consume her, but she held her ground, her voice steady as she touched the metal on her chest, its cool surface a reminder of her purpose, a talisman against the mayor's disdain. "This medal was awarded because my unit protected a girls' school from extremists who wanted to stop them from learning to read," she said, her voice a quiet storm, each word a testament to the truth she'd lived. 28 of those girls are alive today because American soldiers, Latinos, African Americans, children of immigrants, risked their lives. 3 of them didn't come home." The mayor shifted uncomfortably, the growing audience a weight he couldn't ignore, their murmurs turning to whispers of dissent, a tide of support for Eleanor that he hadn't anticipated. "I'm not questioning your personal courage, just, yes, you are," interrupted a middle-aged woman, her voice sharp with indignation, her face flushed with anger, a mother's fury for a child wronged. Eleanor didn't recognize her, but her words carried the weight of shared pain, a voice for the voiceless. "You're disrespecting everything she represents," a young man in the crowd, his hair dyed blue, called out. "Shame on you, Mayor," his voice raw with anger, sparking a ripple of agreement from others, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance, a wave of outrage that echoed through the park. The mayor's irritation flared, his voice rising as he doubled down, his composure unraveling like a threadbare tapestry. "I simply believe Willow Creek needs to move forward, to transform this memorial into something more inclusive, celebrating all kinds of service, not just military. And frankly," he said, looking directly at Eleanor, his eyes cold with disdain, a predator sizing up its prey, "to stop using wounded veterans as propaganda for warmongering policies." The man filming stepped closer, a reporter from the local paper, capturing every word as the crowd whispered, some pulling out their phones to record, their lenses a silent witness to the unfolding drama, a storm captured in pixels and sound. Clara Mitchell stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger, her hands clenched at her sides, a warrior in her own right. "That's unacceptable, Mayor." But the damage was done, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud, a public humiliation that left Eleanor's heart raw and bleeding, a wound that would not easily heal. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest, a fire that threatened to consume her, a blaze of hurt and anger. "I have other commitments." She walked away, her prosthetic leg a steady rhythm against the grass, the murmurs of the crowd fading behind her, a cacophony of support and outrage that followed her like a shadow, a testament to the divide she'd unwittingly exposed. She'd been back in Willow Creek for just 24 hours, and already she felt like a stranger, the town she'd once called home now a battlefield of a different kind, its streets a maze of memories and betrayal, a labyrinth she wasn't sure she could navigate. The next morning, the confrontation dominated headlines, the video going viral on social media with captions that screamed of injustice. "Mayor disrespects war hero and veteran shamed on Memorial Day." Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling in her hands, the bitter taste mirroring the bitterness in her heart, a quiet grief for the home she'd lost. The doorbell rang, a sharp intrusion into her solitude, and she opened the door to find Mei Zhang, a reporter from the Boston Globe, accompanied by a photographer, her expression earnest, her eyes warm with empathy. "Captain Brooks, we'd like to hear your side of the story," she said, her voice gentle but firm, a lifeline in the storm of publicity that threatened to drown her. "Do you believe what happened yesterday reflects how veterans are treated in politically shifting communities?" Eleanor hesitated, the weight of publicity heavy on her shoulders, a burden she hadn't sought, a spotlight she'd never wanted. "I'm not seeking attention, Ms. Zhang," she said, her voice soft but resolute, her hands tightening around the mug, the warmth a small comfort against the cold reality of her situation. "I understand," May replied, her tone sincere, a hand extended across the divide. "But your story has touched so many. The way you handled those accusations with dignity, it's inspiring." Reluctantly, Eleanor agreed to a brief interview, emphasizing that she didn't want to fuel political divides, her voice steady as she spoke, a quiet strength in her words. She spoke of mutual respect, of how service and peace weren't opposing goals, and of her hope that Willow Creek could honor its past while building a better future, her words a bridge between the divides that threatened to tear her town apart, a vision of unity in the face of discord. The article appeared on the front page of the Globe's regional section the next day, titled "Honor and Respect: What We Owe Our Veterans," sparking a firestorm of reactions online, a wave of support that washed over Eleanor like a tide, a swell of voices lifting her up. She sat in a quiet corner of the local bookstore cafe, a baseball cap pulled low to avoid recognition, the scent of espresso and old books a comforting backdrop, a sanctuary in the storm. A young woman with lavender hair and a nose ring approached, her voice tentative, her eyes bright with sincerity. "Excuse me, are you Captain Brooks?" she asked, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Eleanor braced herself, nodding slowly, her heart pounding with the fear of another confrontation, a shadow of the mayor's words lingering in her mind. "Yes." The woman's face softened, her smile genuine, a beacon of hope in the dim light, a crack of sunlight in the darkness. "I just wanted to say, my brother's in the army now, at Fort Bragg. What the mayor said was awful. Not all of us young people think like him." Eleanor's heart warmed, a smile breaking through her guarded expression, a crack of light in the shadows that had enveloped her. "Thank you. What's your brother's name?" "Liam," the woman replied, her voice proud, her eyes glistening with emotion, a sister's love shining through. "Tell him I'm proud of him," Eleanor said, her voice steady, a quiet strength in her words, a promise to a soldier she'd never met. Not for the uniform, but for the courage to commit to something greater than himself. The woman beamed, snapping a quick selfie before walking away, a small connection that reminded Eleanor of the support still out there, a thread of hope in the tapestry of her struggle, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Later that day, Clara called, her voice buzzing with excitement, a spark of energy that cut through Eleanor's exhaustion like a ray of sunlight. "You won't believe this, Ellie. Hundreds of people are mobilizing online. They're organizing a demonstration in support of veterans this Saturday." Eleanor's stomach tightened, the weight of becoming a symbol heavy on her shoulders, a role she'd never sought, a mantle she wasn't sure she could bear. "Clara, I don't want to be the face of a political war," she said, her voice firm, her hands trembling as she gripped the phone, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "It's not about politics," Clara insisted, her tone fierce with conviction, a warrior's resolve in her words. "It's about respect. The mayor crossed a line, and people have noticed." Over the week, the movement grew, veterans from neighboring towns pledged to join, their voices a chorus of solidarity, a testament to the bonds forged in service. Families of active military shared their stories, their words a testament to shared sacrifice, a legacy of courage, and even some of the mayor's supporters voiced discomfort with his comments, their dissent a crack in his polished image, a sign of the tide turning. On Thursday, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor at home. Thomas Reed, a local counselor and political rival of the mayor, his expression somber but determined, a man on a mission. "Captain Brooks," he said, extending his hand, his grip firm but warm, a gesture of respect that eased the tension in her chest. "I'm sorry for what happened. The mayor doesn't speak for all of us." Eleanor shook his hand, her expression wary, her heart pounding with the fear of being used, a pawn in a game she didn't want to play. "I appreciate that, Mr. Reed, but I'm not here to be a political pawn," she said, her voice steady, a quiet defiance in her tone that echoed her resolve. "That's not why I'm here," he assured her, his eyes sincere, a promise in their depths, a vow to stand with her. "I'm a citizen concerned about our community. What happened exposed a divide we need to heal, not widen." They spoke for nearly an hour, discussing ways to turn the controversy into something constructive, their voices a quiet harmony in the storm, a shared vision taking shape. Thomas mentioned the old community center, once a haven for veterans, now shuttered after losing municipal funding, its windows dark, its doors locked, a symbol of neglect. "What if we channeled this energy into something tangible?" Eleanor suggested, her voice steady with purpose, a vision forming in her mind like a beacon in the fog. "A new space for veterans that also serves the whole community?" Saturday morning brought a surprise. Over 400 people gathered in Willow Park, American flags waving alongside placards demanding respect for veterans, their colors a vibrant contrast against the green of the grass, a tapestry of unity in the morning light. The crowd was diverse, veterans in faded uniforms, their medals glinting in the sunlight, a testament to their service. Young activists with colorful hair, their signs bold and unapologetic, a new generation standing in solidarity. Families with children, their laughter a melody of hope, a promise of a brighter future, all united in a shared cause, a community coming together to right a wrong. Eleanor spotted the lavender-haired girl from the cafe, her presence a quiet reassurance, a reminder of the connections she'd forged, the bridges she'd built. Clara took the stage, her voice carrying over the crowd, strong and resolute, a clarion call for justice. "We're here today not to protest against anyone, but to affirm something vital. Respect for those who've served isn't a partisan issue. It's a fundamental American value." When Eleanor was invited to speak, a lump rose in her throat as she looked out at the crowd. Faces from her childhood, strangers who'd become allies, veterans of wars long past, all standing together, their presence a testament to the power of community, a foundation to build upon. Before she spoke, she pulled a small photo from her pocket, a faded image of her unit in Afghanistan, their smiles bright against the desert backdrop, Ramirez's laughter frozen in time, Carter's steady gaze a promise of protection, Nguyen's quiet strength a beacon of faith. She whispered their names, Ramirez, Carter, Nguyen, a private ritual to honor them, her fingers trembling as she tucked the photo away, her heart heavy with their memory, a silent vow to carry their legacy forward. "When I returned to Willow Creek," she began, her voice steady but thick with emotion, a river of feeling flowing through her words. "I wanted to rediscover the home I'd left. But places change, as do people, and that's a good thing." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, the weight of their support grounding her, a foundation to stand upon, a bedrock of shared purpose. "What cannot change is mutual respect. We may disagree about policies, about wars, about the military's role, but we must never disrespect individual sacrifice." The crowd applauded, the sound a wave of affirmation that lifted her spirits, a chorus of voices united in purpose, a symphony of support that echoed through the park. "So I propose something constructive," she continued, her voice gaining strength, a fire igniting within her, a blaze of hope that burned bright. "Let's transform the old community center into a space for veterans that also serves the entire community, a place where veterans can find support, where young people can learn about service in all its forms, and where we can build bridges instead of walls." Thomas Reed joined her on stage, his voice firm with resolve, a partner in her vision, a comrade in the fight for unity. "I've spoken with local investors willing to fund the project if the city provides the space," he announced, sparking a roar of applause, a thunderous affirmation that echoed through the park, a sound that vibrated in Eleanor's chest, a testament to the power of community. The event unfolded peacefully, evolving into a celebration. Children played on the grass, their laughter a melody of hope. Veterans shared stories with activists, their voices a bridge across generations, a tapestry of shared experience. And Boston TV stations captured the moment, amplifying its impact, a ripple that would spread far beyond Willow Creek, a wave of change that could not be stopped. On Sunday, Eleanor woke to news of Mayor Hayes's public apology for his misinterpreted comments at the Memorial Day ceremony, along with his support for the community center and an invitation to meet at City Hall, a gesture that felt more like necessity than sincerity, a political move to salvage his image. The Monday meeting was tense, the mayor's polished facade replaced by a humbled demeanor, his embarrassment evident in the way he avoided her gaze, his hands fidgeting with a pen, a man brought low by the weight of his own words. "Willow Creek is undergoing a transformation," he said, his voice measured, a careful attempt at reconciliation, a step toward redemption. "I believe we can embrace new perspectives without disrespecting important traditions." Eleanor nodded, her tone steady but firm, a quiet strength in her words, a resolve that had carried her through war and now through peace. "I agree, Mayor. It was never my intention to create divisions. I only want to ensure that those who served are treated with the dignity they deserve." In the months that followed, the Willow Creek Veterans and Community Service Center became a reality, with Eleanor at its helm, her leadership a guiding light in the darkness, a beacon of hope for those who'd been left behind. She created programs to connect veterans with jobs, offered counseling for PTSD, and fostered community involvement through initiatives like the Forms of Service Project, which celebrated military, humanitarian, and volunteer work, bringing young people and veterans together in shared projects, a tapestry of service that wove the community closer, a bond that could not be broken. 6 months later, Eleanor was at the center, helping a newly arrived veteran from Afghanistan with VA paperwork, the hum of activity around her a testament to the community they'd built. Veterans laughing over coffee, their voices a symphony of shared experience. Children painting murals, their laughter a melody of hope. The air filled with the scent of fresh paint and possibility, a canvas of renewal. Mayor Hayes entered, his suit less pristine, his expression more genuine than she'd ever seen, a man stripped of his earlier arrogance, a soul laid bare. "Captain Brooks," he greeted, his voice soft, a note of humility in his tone that caught her off guard. "May I have a word?" They sat in her office, where photos of her unit hung alongside images of the center's programs, a blend of past and present, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the journey they'd shared. "I came to thank you," he said, his words a confession she hadn't expected, a moment of vulnerability that softened the edges of her heart. "What you've built here is exactly what our town needed." "I didn't build it alone," she replied, her voice steady, a quiet acknowledgement of the community's role, a recognition of the hands that had lifted her up. "Everyone contributed." "Yes, but it took your leadership, the same leadership you showed in Afghanistan," he said, pausing, his gaze distant, a shadow of regret in his eyes, a man confronting his own shortcomings. "You know, my father served in Vietnam. He came back, different. He never spoke about it, but I grew up seeing his silent suffering. I think that shaped my reaction to military symbols." Eleanor's expression softened, a bridge of understanding forming between them, a shared recognition of the invisible wounds that linger, a moment of connection in the midst of their differences. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle, a hand extended across the divide, a gesture of forgiveness. "Many veterans carry invisible wounds. What we're doing here, creating a space for healing, for dialogue between different viewpoints, it's making Willow Creek better." He nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, a silent promise of change, a vow to do better. "Willow Creek is better because you returned." The following spring, on the center's first anniversary, Eleanor watched with pride as the community gathered to celebrate. Veterans from wars past shared stories with young activists, their voices a harmony of experience, a bridge across generations. Families laughed over games, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers and grilled food, a feast of unity, and children ran across the lawn, their laughter a melody of hope, a promise of a brighter future. A newly unveiled mural on the center's wall showcased diverse faces beneath the words "many forms of service, one shared purpose," a symbol of the unity they'd forged, a testament to the bridges they'd built, a canvas of shared dreams. Mahjong, The reporter who'd first covered the incident approached with a smile, her notebook in hand, her eyes warm with admiration, a witness to the change they'd wrought. "A year makes a big difference, doesn't it, Captain?" Eleanor nodded, her gaze settling on the children playing, their joy a reflection of the future they'd secured, a legacy of love and respect. "It was never about me or the mayor," she said, her voice steady, a quiet strength in her words, a truth that had guided her through the storm. "It was about finding common ground, where we could all recognize the value of sacrifice in whatever form it takes." What does sacrifice mean to you? Share your stories of service or honor in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story resonates with you, how it inspires you to bridge divides in your own life, to honor those who've given so much. May glanced at Eleanor's prosthetic leg, her voice soft, a note of reverence in her tone, a quiet acknowledgement of the cost of courage. "And the scar, does it still hurt?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes tracing the vibrant center, the gathered community a testament to their shared journey, a mosaic of healing and hope. "The scars are marks of honor, not for what I lost, but for what we gained. And what we've gained here is worth every pain." That night, alone in her home, Eleanor took the Medal of Honor from its box, its gold surface catching the soft glow of a lamp, a beacon of memory in the quiet room, a light in the darkness. She hung it in a simple frame on her living room wall, not as a symbol of war, but as a reminder that some things, freedom, dignity, the right for girls to learn, were worth any sacrifice. For the first time since returning to Willow Creek, she truly felt at home. The town streets no longer foreign but a canvas of shared stories, a tapestry of resilience that wrapped around her like a warm embrace. Small town streets don't look the same when you've seen the world through different eyes. Some wounds heal, some remain, but I hold my head up to the sky. They don't always understand the weight this uniform still bears. Some see glory, some see pain, but few can see the truth that's there. These scars of honor, marks of pride, tell stories words could never say. Not every battle leaves a scar, you see, but every scar has made me who I am today. In the face of disrespect, I stand tall with quiet dignity, not fighting for recognition, but for those who served alongside me. It's not about the medals we wear or the politics that divide. It's about the promise we keep to those who never made it home alive. These scars of honor, marks of pride, tell stories words could never say. Not every battle needs a scar, you see, but every scar has led me home to stay. And I wouldn't change a thing. At Daily Narrated Stories, we share tales that remind us of the sacrifices that shape us, stories that inspire us to find common ground and honor those who've served, to build communities where every voice is heard, every scar respected. Don't miss your chance to be part of this journey. Subscribe now to help us reach 1,000 subscribers this week, ensuring more stories like Eleanor's reach those who need them most, those who find solace in the tales we tell, who find strength in the heroes we celebrate. Act now. Hit that button, comment, and share, because every story deserves to be heard, and every voice deserves to be amplified.